Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm back with another video. Today we're reacting to the most watched, scariest Japanese documentary, mockumentary, or whatever.
Sponsored by Rocket Money. So we're still right at the start of the new year, and like many others, I get started a 2005 title out of Disturb. If you want to get or get started for absolutely free.
I probably should have had that set like before the video started, but it's whatever.
If you spend any time at all looking into the best, scariest, or most disturbing found footage / mockumentaries, you're going to stumble upon a 2005 title out of Japan called Noroi the Curse. Overall, fans of the subgenre sing its praises, with many considering it to be the best of its kind, while a smaller segment of viewers, of course, see it as quite the opposite. There are those down the middle who enjoyed it, but maybe found it too confusing, leaving them to Google answers to their questions after the fact. In my last video, we talked about a cult, and Noroi is actually an earlier work by the very same director, Koji Shiraishi, and what some might argue is—
So a mockumentary is basically like documentary style movies, but they're obviously not real, right? Is that what it is?
His magnum opus. I actually first watched both of these films around the same time several years ago, and while I immediately enjoyed A Cult, I was unfortunately left in that awkward middle when it came to Noroi. I would of course rewatch the film a couple times since then, and given that Japanese mockumentaries have been a running theme on the channel, I figured this would be the perfect time to discuss Noroi the Curse, from its strengths, potential drawbacks, as well as if it actually lives up to all the hype. Now, to help illustrate all of this, I'd like to start right at the initial events of the film. We start with a VHS tape labeled simply Noroi, and it's a documentary. Its creator, paranormal investigator Masafumi Kobayashi, vanished just 2 days after its completion when his house mysteriously burned to the ground. While his wife's body was found in the wreckage, Kobayashi, however, was never seen again. With this framing established, we then get to see the contents of the Noroi documentary itself, offering us a glimpse into the year and a half before the investigator would ultimately go missing. The story begins proper in November 2002. Kobayashi and his cameraman investigate a mother and daughter who hear the cries of babies when there presumably are none around. The mother believes the sounds come—
Bro, I'm gonna be honest, that's like the scariest thing, bro. Just like little kids or like baby noises, bro, that aren't like when nobody's home. That's like the most creepiest start of any horror movie. And if I heard that in real life, bro, I'm leaving the crib.
Come from next door, but her neighbor only has a young son, around 6 to 9 years of age, and no infants. When Kobayashi visits, a disheveled woman answers, glares at the camera, starts going off on them, and then ultimately slams the door in their faces.
ごめんください。すいません。
Oh. Yeah, she doesn't look out. She's seen better days, bro. She does not look well.
すいません。
You can tell she didn't get no sleep too, because she has huge eye bags.
に来てるんですけども。
なんでそんな言い方できんだよ。
少し。
なんでそんな言い方ができるんだって聞いてんだよ。
お話をちょっと伺わせて。
言い方。
すいません。私小林。
Damn, bro. Damn. Someone woke up and watched the bed. Impossible. Oh shit. What the heck? And you just see a random kid just looking out the window, bro.
Now, upon later review of the footage, Kobayashi realizes that he managed to capture some strange-sounding audio during their encounter, and thought it sounded a bit like cats at first, but analysis by an expert confirmed that it actually was the sound of human infants. And yes, that's infants, as in plural, because apparently the analysis picked up at least 5 different voices. Of course, that doesn't really add up. The woman was thought to only have 1 son, and even if she did have younger children, why would she have 5 babies? Kobayashi returns to the neighborhood only to learn that the mother and son abruptly moved away, and unsurprisingly, when they did, the sounds of the babies crying stopped. With no leads, Kobayashi goes snooping around this now abandoned property, finding piles of unopened mail revealing the strange woman's name, Junko Ishii. Days later, the mother and daughter who first reported the noises would pass away in a freak car accident.
What? Bro, what are the chances of that? And also when oh my god. My fault. You still with me? Alright. So what I was about to say was like in Japan, bro, a lot of people be embedding in the cribs, bro. A lot of people be bending the cribs.
Now, it's at this point that the documentary abruptly shifts and would continue doing so for a while. As for what I mean by that, we see seemingly unrelated TV footage from August 2003, nearly a year later. It's a variety show testing children for possible psychic abilities.
フィルムケースの中に
What
あ
in
る
the
も
life
の
is
を
strange
書
is
かれた
this?
紙が入っています。そして、みんなはこの紙に何が書かれているのかを投資してもらいます。
One girl, Kana, perfectly replicates hidden images, be it squares, circles and circles, spirals. That is until the final one, where she draws an unsettling face instead of a letter-number sequence. In another test, the children try to manifest water into a flask, and of course, only Kana succeeds.
集中する子供たち。そしてこの後、
Bro,
山かなちゃんが
I love the voice.
驚くべき現象を
I love these type of voice actors. I really want to that deep Japanese voice over, bro. Go
起こす。
やっぱかなちゃん来てますね。
皆さんご覧いただけますでしょうか。
Ooh.
フラスコの底の方に水滴がどんどん膨らむように溜まってきています。お伝えしておきますけれども、フラスコの底ですとか机の上に仕掛けがあるということは一切ありません。
さっきの同じ子ですよ。
An analysis of the water finds plankton from rivers or lakes. Stranger still, the flask contains strands of hair, possibly from a newborn. Kobayashi visits Kana, who's unfortunately sick with a fever, but before we can really learn more, the documentary shifts yet again, this time to an unaired segment featuring actress Marika Matsumoto on a ghost hunt at a shrine. She gets an eerie feeling and suddenly collapses, screaming. About what, we really don't have any idea. The footage cuts away to a live talk show where Matsumoto recounts the experience with Kobayashi right at her side. It's then an eccentric guest is introduced.
Is this tinfoil, bro? Is this man covered in tinfoil?
Hori, dressed head to toe in aluminum foil.
I mean, tinfoil, aluminum foil. My fault. Oh my god, again. It keeps. Oh my god. Yeah, we're back.
The host calls him a psychic, but Hori seems erratic, to say the very least. Instead of offering insight into Matsumoto's experience at the shrine, he ultimately lunges at her, screaming warnings about pigeons before security drags him off stage. Later, Kobayashi meets with the show's producer, who reveals that the shrine footage had been edited as to not freak Matsumoto out. As for what that means, in the uncut version, a ghostly white figure is Matsumoto out. As for what that means, in the uncut version,
Ooh, look at that. Bro, just hidden stuff like this make it so scary. Like, we don't need, like, because in today's horror movies today, you know when a jump scare's gonna come out, but we're just leaving hidden stuff like this without even, like, giving it, like, thought and stuff makes it way scarier. Like, it actually builds up tension.
a ghostly white figure is spotted in the woods behind the actress before she starts screaming. Kobayashi decides to show this to her, and upon seeing this raw footage, Matsumoto then recalls something that she hadn't mentioned before: automatic writing. Her scribbles resemble eerie circles and jagged lines, and what they mean at this moment is unclear. After this, Kobayashi revisits Kana's family. She's no longer sick, but her mother says she's been acting strangely, talking to someone who isn't there. When asked about it, Kana simply says,
かなちゃんが時々
Yo,
話し
kids
ている
talking and stuff that aren't
お
even
母
there,
さん
bro.
には見えない人って
That's
誰
just
か
called
な
imaginary friend, bro. It's not that deep.
多分ね、もう全部ダメなんだよ。
The tape cuts once again to a brightly colored variety show, a stark contrast to everything else that we've seen so far. The host is en route to meet a super psychic, which is of course none other than Tinfoil Hat Hori. A neighbor bluntly calls him a psycho, implying that there's no saving him, and what that actually means he does not clarify. As we expect though, Hori's home is a disaster. Piles of garbage outside, walls covered in tinfoil. When asked about it, he explains that he receives messages from space and can see
Yeah, I can just tell, bro. Just looking at Buddy right there with the tinfoil, bro. Aluminum foil. You already know they're on some space timing, bro. Alien timing right there. and then
the future. Also something about ectoplasmic worms. And we're only 30 minutes into this 2-hour nightmare. Okay, so I opened this video by admitting that upon my first viewing, Noroi actually left me kind of confused, and I'd like to elaborate on that a bit. As I was watching both Noroi and Occult, there were certain distractions going on that were out of my control. With Occult, the storyline is mostly straightforward, so a bit of distraction didn't completely throw me off. If it wasn't evident already, Noroi, especially in its first half hour or so, does a lot of jumping from one thing to another. We'll be with Kobayashi, then suddenly following a variety TV show, then a ghost hunting segment, all with completely new characters introduced each time. Needless to say, looking away at really any point, but especially this crucial world-building stage, would be a complete detriment to your experience when watching this movie if you decide to do so. Of course, that's on me, and I should have made sure that I wasn't going to be distracted in any way just by saving it for another.
That kind of kills it, bro. I just want one main storyline instead of having multiple things that showed up, bro. It reminds me of an anime called Doroya, whatever it's called. It starts with a D. It's just multiple things, bro, happening at once with no actual story. It just kind of gets, I don't know, boring.
Other time or whatever it may have been. With that said, though, everything does become much easier to follow in the second half, especially as things start to fall into place. As for what happens exactly, I would normally go into a play-by-play, but given the nature of this movie, I feel like it's just best experienced firsthand, so while I will touch on some spoilers for those interested, you can skip over them just in case. Just fast forward to whenever this text is gone. Okay, so those of you who have already seen Noroi will know that through a further series of bizarre events, all these seemingly unrelated characters introduced early on start to cross paths. Kana goes missing, and the person of interest, according to her parents, is a mysterious man wearing a tinfoil hat. Tinfoil Hat Hori, in a hysterical fit, blurts out the name Kagutaba. As all this is going down, actress Matsumoto gets back in contact with Kobayashi after she wakes up to these strange knots that she's been tying in her sleep. And upon setting up a camera to capture Matsumoto sleepwalking, Kobayashi in turn captures audios of a disembodied voice that simply and eerily states Kagutaba, the same unfamiliar word blurted out by Hori. Through further investigation, Kobayashi discovers that Kagutaba was the name of a so-called demon, or rather simply an unknown entity, that was
Kagutaba, a demon, bro. And I like how in this movie, they all connect, you know? It's I like seeing stuff like that. It's legit crossover, but Kagutaba. What a word.
Used as a weapon by residents who once inhabited a village that has since been submerged due to the construction of a dam back in the 1970s. Kagutaba, whatever it is, was said to have gone rogue, forcing the town to carry out rituals to pacify the being and ensuring everyone's safety. Kobayashi, with the help of a local, is shown recordings of the final ceremony.
Bro, and vintage stuff like this, vintage videos like that, makes stuff so creepy.
This ritual, of course, is where we get that iconic shot of a villager dressed up as Kagutaba in a mask, who eventually collapses in a hysterical fit, ultimately cutting the ritual short. And it's here where we finally get our last loose ends really tied up. We discover that the priest who led these rituals was named Ishii, and that his daughter was the one playing the role of Kagutaba. As you might recall, it turns out that Kobayashi already knows of a woman with that last name, Junko Ishii, the strange woman from the very first segment, which, by the way, when that was revealed, I completely forgot about her at that point. And with that, I would like to talk about some of the major strengths of Noroi. Right off the bat, it is a very unique experience, as a horror movie, a mockumentary, or even when compared to other films by the same director like Occult. There are definitely parallels, the format being the most obvious, as well as the presence of a director character on screen as opposed to behind the scenes. Then you have the mention of supernatural worms. But really, that's where these common denominators end. As for how it compares to other mockumentaries and found footage, well, the way that this thing is edited, especially at first, is as chaotic as you'd expect anything to be when making an actual documentary. Real life doesn't follow a script, so things in chronological order aren't always going to be clear-cut and
now I see why they did what they did. They did it because in real life, that's just how it is. Nothing is scripted. So you know what? I take back what I said. Mockumentary.
Follow a specific path. This becomes even more apparent when you're trying to unravel a mystery with several moving parts. What's even better here is the inclusion of different media sources. The variety TV segments in particular are ones that stick out to me, because if you have ever watched any Japanese TV, these feel as close to real as you can get. From the editing to the text, sound effects, set design, etc., it really does feel like an actual documentary, pulling from actual outside sources, not to mention pretty grounded ones at that. As for what I mean mean, I think that a pretty common criticism of a cult was its use of not so great special effects, and while I personally found them charming, I can completely understand how that would take people out.
Yo, yo, what is this? Yo, this is the worst CGI I've seen. Bro, I feel like Snapchat filters are better than this.
Of the experience. With Noroi, though, things are surprisingly restrained. For example, when we first meet Kana, the faux TV segment could have had the children try something like levitation or telekinesis, but instead they were tasked with something completely believable and subtle on camera. Even the whole manifesting water thing looked convincing enough. Kana didn't, part the sea or anything like that, and instead only filled the flask with a couple of teaspoons at most. Now, all of this culminates in this slow burn, unsettling experience with absolutely zero jump scares, by the way. One where, at least to me, it felt a bit like witnessing something that no human was ever supposed to, something unnatural and ancient that we're powerless as humans to face. By the story's conclusion, we have most of the answers we need about all the human characters involved, but almost nothing when it comes to the overarching threat. And to top this all off, Kobayashi is never found. The film kept its promise at the beginning about how the director was
Wait, is Kobayashi? Wait.
missing, and after a 2-hour runtime,
Boy, this is like legit. This is like Blair Witch before Blair Witch. Like these type of movies. Like I like these type of horror movies, bro, because they can legit. They make it look so realistic, and they don't do like crazy stuff like the Conjuring. Like the Conjuring films, they do like a lot of crazy stuff that are just takes me out of the experience because like that seems so off, especially when she like in the first scene of the Conjuring 2 when she like astral projects, bro. It's just like I don't. It just takes me out, bro. Cause I'm like, bro, that's so unrealistic.
we really can't even begin to fathom where he might be. And that brings me to the potential drawbacks of Noroi. Now, I'm not about to finger wag at anybody if this isn't your cup of tea. We all enjoy different types of horror, and I personally prefer to abide by what I see as the first commandment, so to speak, of the genre. Horror is subjective. Having said that, every positive I just mentioned could in turn be a massive negative if someone doesn't really care for these things. Like if you dislike found footage, this movie is basically all found footage. It's definitely a better example of it, but it is still what it is nonetheless. If you're not in the mood for paying super close attention, or if these themes simply do not scare you, then the same problem remains. If you're into gorgeous cinematography and dynamic shots, then yeah, this unfortunately is not the film to go for. But what about the claims that Noroi is the scariest movie of its type? Again, horror is subjective, so I can only give my opinion.
My opinion, it kind of is because it's just so realistic, and if you don't know anything about it, you might actually mistake it for something real. Like look at the Blair Witch. Like, people actually thought that was real, but it was all fake.
And when I think of movies that are scary, like straight
Like when you start doubting yourself and you're seeing like if it's real or not, bro, that's when it kind of makes it way more scary than that.
forward scary, that usually means something that'll make me want to keep on all the lights at night. The Ring, for example, is something that stuck with me as a kid because it made me scared to death that somewhere in that dark corner of the room I'm going to end up seeing a creepy woman with long hair covering her face. Why that scares me so much, I don't know. Needless to say, it was traumatizing, but it's not the only form of horror that I find to be impactful. For as creepy as the hallways are in Silent Hill 2, for example, what disturbs me about it is the horror of things like intense guilt, grief, and depression. Parasite is another example that I can give, and while not a horror movie, the idea of someone secretly living in my walls gets under my skin, as do the horrors of capitalism, but I won't preach to you right now. But anyway, like I said earlier, Noroi gave me the feeling of witnessing something that I simply was not supposed to. Something beyond human comprehension. And with that said, in a weird way, it felt a little tiny bit like cosmic horror in that sense. I don't know if that's just me. But anyway, what you'll take from Noroi, I have no clue. But either way, this is one that I do personally highly recommend if you haven't already seen it. And it is also luckily one of the most accessible Japanese found footage / mockumentary films available to Western audiences. Depending on when you decide to watch this, it should still be available on Shudder. And no, they're not sponsoring this video, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Anyway, thanks again so much for watching, and if you have any recommendations for things you'd like to see covered in the future, feel free to email me. Thanks.
Video, let me know what y'all like and what you didn't like about the video and what you want me to react to next, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace. Peace.